Welcome to Home Cooking Kitchen. Today we are doing a recipe requested by my mother-in-law, Ruthie Julian. She wanted to see us cook chicken marsala. She had gotten a recipe sent to her from on the internet, which, you know, the internet's a great thing, but not everything turns out the way you think. It's better to see it done. So I said, okay. So today we will do chicken marsala. We have here a lovely dinner that can make a Wednesday night feel like a Saturday night. It's inexpensive, it's fast, and you can do most of the prep before you even need to cook it. Join us today at Home Cooking Kitchen for chicken marsala. Chicken marsala is a really simple dish, and it's one, this marsala sauce is really a mushroom and marsala. It's very easy to make, has only a few ingredients, and you can use it on veal or pork piccata. You can use it in a number of places, but today we're going to use chicken. So let's take a look at the ingredients that we're going to use today. Let me move these things. Okay, so oyster mushrooms, porcinis, creminis, you name it, if you have it, it's great. Now remember, if your mushroom's a little bit darker, it's probably going to have a little more meaty flavor. So we like to use, you can just buy this at the regular grocery store. These are actually very tasty. We're not going to use the stems. So mushrooms, we're going to need about 2.5 cups of mushrooms because they'll cook down rather quickly. Need a little fresh garlic. Now if you don't have fresh garlic or you don't want to deal with mincing it or pressing it, you can always use garlic powder. Again, remember, the fresher your ingredients, the better your dish is going to taste. We have some fresh herbs, and this is where you can kind of make it your own. We have basil or sage or thyme. Now today I'm going to use thyme in the recipe because I feel like it's a little bit less than basil and not quite as strong as sage. However, these two are definitely something that you can use. And if you have these ingredients dried, go ahead and do that. What I'd like to see you do is when you use dried, put it in a little dish of some sort, and with a little olive oil, let that kind of soak up and not be quite so dry when you add it. Okay, and then the end of our yes, we've come back from a long extended stay, so here we go. So then we're just going to use a little parsley to do some garnishing because that fresh parsley on it will really help out the richness of this sauce. A little bit of salt. Guess what follows that? A little bit of pepper. Olive oil, good grade olive oil. We're going to have a little bit of chicken stock. Remember, we keep this all the time, and if not, if you have the chicken stock that comes in the carton, that's fine. Try to get it as low sodium as you can so you can control your salt. We have about a cup of AP flour, and we're going to use just a tad bit of butter. Again, unsalted butter so that you can control that salt. And then, of course, marsala. Now, there's varying grades of marsala. You can use whatever you can find, but the better your wine you're going to cook with, the better off you're going to be. And then, of course, now today we're going to serve this with a spaghetti pasta. However, you can use linguine. You can use, I like linguine a lot, but we're going to use spaghetti, the thinner round noodles like you're used to seeing. But you can use anything you want. You can even use this over a nice fresh garlic potato. There's a lot of other things you can use on your proteins other than just pasta. And then we have the star of the show. Well, one would argue that the chicken is the star of the show, but we're going to talk about that in a second. We have 2 chicken breasts that I have brined in a little bit of Marsala wine. A little trick. And this is, as you can see, it didn't brown up these. You know, sometimes if you put stuff in chicken, it makes it really dark. It's just going to give that chicken a little extra. And we're going to talk about that chicken in a little bit. So coming up next, I'll show you the tools that you'll need, and it'll be easy, guarantee you've got them in your house. Let's talk about our tools and maybe a few little things you didn't know. First of all, we're going to need a sharp knife that you're going to be not only splitting your chicken, but you're also going to be cutting your mushrooms. And we need a meat mallet because we want that chicken, or if you're using pork or veal, to be very thin. This is not a dish where you're going to have a big, thick piece of chicken and then this sauce. The sauce and the chicken work together. So this is a meat mallet, and this is a tenderizing side, which we don't need. We're going to use the flat side of this, and then nice whisk to move them around. And I try not to use metal very much because it kind of crushes your ingredients a little bit. If you're a fan of them, you know, go ahead, but I do like wooden instruments. And this spoon, for a long time I thought, why in the world? I guess that middle is just to let the liquid through. Actually, the middle of this hole is enough pasta to feed one person. So you can put your pasta in here and go, okay, I'm feeding 3 people today. 3 holes full. 3 holes, please. And that'll keep you knowing if you need enough pasta. The only other thing we're going to be using today is we've got a pot with a drop-in strainer on it or colander to cook our noodles, our spaghetti. And then we've got a rather deep, I like a deep pan like this. This is just a stainless steel Viking. I don't use nonstick. If it's ready, it should let go. We'll talk about that when we cook it. But I like these high sides because it keeps that heat coming while you're cooking that chicken. And we're going to start off with that. So we're going to get everything prepped up. Now you remember, what's the rule? We want to make sure everything's prepped, ready to go before we need it, because things cook faster sometimes than we think they do. So we're going to get everything prepped up, get our chicken prepped, get everything ready to go, and then we're going to make this. Let's start with our chicken. A lot of times we're tempted to kind of just cook this and not have the chicken taste its very best. Every piece of a dish should taste delicious on its own. So we don't want to just make chicken and then pour sauce on it, because then when the sauce is gone, you just taste like a dry, bland chicken. We talked about, I put a little bit of marinara. What? See, I got COVID brain. We put a little Marsala in here. Overnight is best, but 2 to 3 hours is fine. What we're going to do is we're going to butterfly this and make this into much smaller pieces. Now, as you see, these are nice big breasts, nicely meated. I've left a little bit of the fat on them. And this will easily, these 2 chicken breasts will easily feed a family of 4 or a family of 2 and have leftovers, which is kind of what we do. So we want to slice these first. So let's take a look at this. We want to look at, now this pepper that you're seeing is just some peppers. Prepping. We know that this tapers off here, and it's a little thicker here, okay? And this little tenderloin here, you can either leave it, cook it separately, or cut it off, whichever one you like. So today, we're just going to cut that right off. And I'm going to actually cook that separately because the dog will like it. Yes, Dickie Meatloaf, we have to take him into consideration. So we see that up here, John, can you zoom in right here and let's take a look at the level of this? So we see that this is much thicker than this part. So if we were to cook this like this would take too long to cook and this would overcook. So we're going to butterfly it. Now, start with the thickest part and aim for about half and just slide your knife through and then just kind of pull it back as you do, just nice and easy. And now you have something that's a little bit easier to work with. And remember, we're going to pound these to make these thin, but now it's all about the same length. So we're going to put him over here, do the same thing here. And I like to get that initial cut and then sort of just let my knife do the work on butterflying the rest. because the weight will come with it. Now this one, I'm going to leave this little tenderloin on, and I'll show you the difference when we get ready to do that. So just be careful where your knife is going. Always know where your hand is. And just give this a quick butterfly so that this, now that's tenderloin, is really, he's causing a problem. But you know what? There's no problem that cannot be surmounted. I think everybody is learning that these days, huh? Okay. So we're going to pound these, and then we're going to dredge them in a light flour coating. This is not like a fry. This is a very light dusting so that we get a little flavor on the outside and a lot of flavor on the inside. So to begin that, we're going to take, I just use a baggie. Now I've dusted this baggie with a little bit of flour inside so that when I do this, it's not going to stick quite so bad. Now, my mic might pick this up a little too loud, and if you're having one of those days, don't smash it too much. I mean, don't hit it too hard. You'd be surprised how heavy this is, and let the weight of that work it. But we just want it to be about even. So we've still got some thin part this way. Remember, we're using the flat side. If you use this side, it's going to pound the plastic into it, and we don't want to do that. Just kind of get him all nice and ready. Now I'm prepping out just, if you don't have these, definitely worth it. You can use a bowl or a plate if you like, but I do like these. They're very inexpensive, and it really holds your flour and stuff. Okay, let's go ahead and get this other guy in here, give him a good talking to. Now this recipe of using this chicken like this is also great for any chicken that you're going to cook, a chicken breast. Remember that chicken breast has very little fat to it, so you want to cook it fast so that it's not like a roast where you're going to roast it for quite some time. We want to make sure that it cooks fast and it cooks even. Okay. And then just run your hand over it and see if you feel any places that feel a little thicker than others. So as you see here, I don't know if John can you run in on that? You can see it's fairly flat. So that means it'll cook even. So we're going to take out our little tenderloin. Well, let's leave him in here until we flour the other one. Okay, I'm going to do a quick wash of my hands, and then we're going to prepare the flour for this, and we'll come right back, and then I'll start getting this pan ready, and off we go. Okay, all washed up. I'm going to be handling this chicken a little bit more, and I could have just waited, but chicken's just one of those things that I really like to make sure my hands are always clean. I just don't want to take a chance on cross-contamination. We'll clean this cutting board in a minute as well. All right, let's look at this. We're going to start off with our flour. Now remember, this isn't like an egg wash fry flour. This is a half a cup of AP flour, and we're going to add to that a little bit of salt. We're going to add about 2 teaspoons. Now remember, we're using unsalted everything else, so we need to make sure that our salt is there. And we're going to use some fine ground pepper for this, because this is a little bit more delicate. Now you could use white pepper if you want. It's even a little bit more delicate. And we're just going to give this a little swish. Okay. Now we're going to add this to this mixture. I'm going to use about half of it. Okay. Get him all coated. Now remember, we want it thin. We don't want a thick covering. This is just to give that little bit of a sear, some flavor. Let him come over this way. Now I'm going to end up cutting these into 4 individual pieces, but I'm going to wait until after it's cooked. I don't want these pieces to be so small that they're going to kind of shrink up and be rather small. I'm going to wait until after it's cooked. And actually on the presentation I have a little trick, and I'll show you how to do it, control portions a little bit better. So we're going to take this, put this on a drying rack, and let it sit for about 4 or 5 minutes before we actually start heating it up. I'm going to get the other one done, and then I'm going to show you how to cook these off. All right, we have our chicken, as you can see here on the cooling rack, but actually they're drying. We want to let that sit. It helps that flour to stay on there a little bit more. You're not going to get it coming off, but we're not going to be using a really high heat. Remember, this isn't fried chicken. It just adds a little bit of flavor to it. So while we're doing that, give it about 5 minutes, 10 if you have the time. We're going to get our pan started, and our pan is going to have about, let's get this guy turned on, and now this is an induction. We're going to go for about medium to medium high. We don't want this to smoke, and we don't want the chicken to burn. So we're going to run about, let's say 1200 on an induction, medium high heat on your stovetop. So we've added about a half of a tablespoon of oil. We don't want that oil to be in there too heavy. Now we'll drain the oil before we actually make the Marsala sauce in it, but we need to make sure that this is pretty hot before we put it in there. So how can we tell? Well, we're going to see a shimmer. It'll start to shimmer, and it'll start to kind of move around a little bit as that oil heats up. If you don't have a good grade olive oil, you could substitute vegetable oil, but you're going to lose the flavor of that wonderful olive oil. So we're going to put that on there, let it sit for about 5 minutes, heat up nice and easy, and we're going to prep out our mushrooms. So I'm going to remove the tops from these. You don't have to. If you want to leave the tops, you're welcome to. If you want to cut them and make them with their little stems, sometimes I do. But on this one, we're just going to take those off. And this little, if you can see, all right, so he's getting hot quick. I'm going to add a tad touch to it. I'm telling you, if you ever want to cook things fast, get an induction burner. They are so handy. I'm going to go ahead and add my chicken to it because it's already hot enough. I'm going to cook one at a time. I'm going to very carefully lay him in here. Put that up to about 600. I dropped that down just a little bit. Now on the mushrooms, you can take this little white part out. It really doesn't add any flavor, and it certainly isn't attractive. And we're going to need about 2.5 cups. Now we're going to start to hear that sizzle in a minute. So if you hear sizzling or bubbling, I've got the other thing ready back there in the back, the pot with the colander in it to do our pasta. And I don't want to put that pasta in until this dish is ready to serve. Inside the pasta water, I have about a cup of chicken stock, homemade chicken stock. It's the same stock that we're going to use in this Marsala dish. Okay. Here we go. Now remember, when you're slicing, you know, knife skills, right? You want to have anything that's flat on the bottom. And we don't want these really super thin. We want these to have a little heft to them. So we just want to have them, maybe each one of them into 4 or 5 pieces. So we're just going to cut those up. Make sure they're all about the same size so that they cook evenly. And if you've got a really big guy, you might want to cut him again. But we want to be able to taste that mushroom. Now, if you have people in your family that don't care for mushrooms, leaving them big like this can always mean that they can pick them out. They won't have to eat them if they don't want to. Remember, sharpen your knives every time before you use them. And if you don't know how to sharpen your knife, we have a knife show coming up, and you'll be able to watch it. Okay, so we have our wonderful mushrooms. Look at how lovely they look. I love mushrooms. I use them all the time. The other thing that we're going to use is we're going to use a little bit of garlic. Now remember, we said you could use garlic powder if you want to. It is a little bit of a different flavor, but it'll still work. Don't use garlic salt. Never on any show will you ever hear from me garlic salt. Okay, so we're going to take about 3 of these guys. Now remember that garlic burns, so we might add it a little bit closer to the end. We don't want it to burn, and we just want to get these 3 cloves. Now, If you remember, this is the fun part, smash, and off it comes. And there's your beautiful garlic clove. And he can just sit over here with his friends, the mushrooms. They can chat about whatever it is that they're getting ready to chat about. You want a garlic that's got a lot of pulp to it, or plumpness, pulp. We had mimosas the other day for a brunch. My oldest son hates pulped orange juice. Guess what we ended up getting at the store? We had to strain orange juice, so I have pulp on my brain. Okay, so we're going to get all of that off. Now, remember that these little garlics, these guys are sticky. So your hand's going to be a little bit sticky. Okay, we're just going to let those sit there for right now. So if we can direct our attention over here, we want to do about 3 minutes per side. Now remember that chicken continues to cook after you remove it from the heat. So we don't want it to be dry. We want it to be flavorful, but we don't want it medium rare. Chicken has to be cooked to 165 degrees. On something thin like this, now John, I'm going to tilt this to you and this is going to shut off. One thing about induction burners, it'll shut that off. Now you can see right around, maybe you can, maybe you can't. All right. You can see that right around the edges, it's starting to get just a tiny bit opaque. So I have to turn him back on. Anytime you lift those things up, it's a thing. So we're going to let him finish cooking off. Now, the only thing else that we need to do is we have our mushrooms done. We have our salt and pepper on standby. The thing I forgot to mention a little earlier, and this is optional, but it's kind of not optional, is we want about a half a cup of heavy cream. A Marsala sauce should actually be a little bit creamy. Now, you can leave this out and have it be a little bit more just clear. It's not going to thicken as much unless you thicken that down. I like mine with a little bit of cream, and then we're going to top it with that pepper. You know how I love pepper. Okay, so remember that when we're using a nonstick pan, if something lets go, it's pretty much done on that side. If it's hard to move, then guess what? It's not done. So we're going to turn this over. We're going to do both of our chicken breasts. Remember that we have our hot water ready for our pasta, and we'll measure that out. We're going to cook off these chicken breasts, and then we're going to prep out the sauce. Be back in just a second. We've taken our chicken breasts, and I don't know, John, can you zoom over there? They're cooling. Remember that they continue to cook, so we cooked them to an internal temp of 160. We want 165, but they're firm to the touch. They're not squishy. That's if you don't have a meat thermometer. You really should get an instant read. ThermoWorks works great, but if you don't, if you just press on it, it shouldn't have very much give. If it feels like this part of your thumb, not done. If it feels like this part of your thumb with your fist, done. Okay, so we have drained most of the oil and such from the pan. However, we're leaving those tasty bits because those tasty bits are what's going to add to our sauce. So we're going to get get it heated back up, and we don't want it really super hot. We're going to begin to add our mushrooms. Okay, so all we have in here right now is just a tiny bit of olive oil that was left over from earlier, and we're going to start to add, and the tasty bits from cooking that chicken. So we're going to add this. Now, let me add that sometimes people like to add shallots. Here, you can add shallots. I am kind of a purist today. I'm not going to add any shallots, although I do like shallots. Onions would be overpowering. So shallots would do well. You know, they're just a much more relaxed onion. I'm not going to add that garlic yet. I'm going to let these kind of cook down. I'm going to give them a tad bit of salt, just a tad, to help draw out some of that moisture. And as these start to cook, I don't really have to, let's take a look. I don't really have to add anything or do anything. I'm just going to let those cook down for a few minutes. And as these begin to cook down, I'm going to get that garlic prepped out. So, remember now you can use garlic powder. If I just keep telling you the same thing, it's because I don't want you to not cook because you go, I don't have those things. There's always substitutions for everything. You just really want you to get used to using fresh ingredients. You know, there's whole companies now that do nothing but tell you about how fresh their ingredients are. Ah, piece of paper. Pooey, don't want that. And that's great because we do want fresher ingredients. The fresher for your family, the fresher for you. The fresher for your health, you control your salt. Notice that there's no sugar in this. I've seen a lot of recipes that called for sugar. Marsala wine is a little bit sweet. Now I like a drier, sweeter, or less sweet wine. But we've got about a cup here. So we've got some chicken stock we're going to add again, and then we're going to add this little bit of cream at the end and a little butter. We're going to add some butter right now, and we're going to do about a tablespoon. And we're going to just let this start to cook down. I'm just going to give it a quick stir so that I know that those mushrooms are being coated. This is on like a medium heat. You don't need to fry these. You just need to saute them, which is a low to medium heat. You want to see them start to shrink up and look like they're a little bit done. You should be able to reach in and have one go squeezy, squeezy, and it's done. If it doesn't do that, it's not done. So we're going to let these cook off, and I'm going to get ready to do the pasta. So where's my thing for how many holes? It's over here. You know, we're gonna claim COVID brain, but I'm gonna tell you. This is how it goes. That's why I prep everything out. I get busy visiting, and then I forget what I'm doing. That's why I have everything done. So we're gonna feed a family of 4 today. So how many holes? So we're gonna do our holes here. Now you could make this stretch as far as 8 people. I'm telling you, it's true. We tend to overdo it on the how big our plates are these days. I do have to tell you a funny, John and I we're on a little bit of a diet. You know, we're not eating anything that's not as yummy. We're just not eating anything that is too big. We've just cut down on it. Okay, so here's one person. Why do I measure it? How many times you make anything with pasta, and then you end up with too much pasta, and then there you've got it sitting laying around like whoever had too much pasta. But I digress. Generally I do a half of a fistful, but I want you to see this. You can just put it right through here, and this is enough for a person. So there's 2. And remember, we're going to go for 4 people today. Oh my gosh, I don't want to do that. Then don't do it. Then don't do it. Just grab it, and if you have it left over, serve it with something else, right? Just hold your little thing up, let that go through. I'm going to let those extras stay. And one more. So our mushrooms are getting nice right now. You know, I can barely cook a mushroom without instantly wanting to eat it right there in the pan. I have to be a little careful when it comes to mushrooms and onions and things like that, because that's one of my favorite flavor profiles. It's just salt and pepper, onions, and mushrooms. So here we have a family of 4, and it's about a full circumference of my thumb and forefinger. And I'm just going to drop this down in here. Now that water is already hot, and it isn't boiling, but it's already hot, and it has a cup of chicken stock in it. So let's turn our attention here to our friends the mushrooms, see how they're doing. Now I'm scraping up as we go so that we can get all of the bits from the chicken. So we're going to cook those all off. I'm going to go ahead and add my garlic at this point. Now again, we don't want that garlic to burn. Oh, pooey, you have to throw the whole thing out and start all over again. That is no bueno for sure. We're going to let this cook down, and then we're going to return. I'm going to show you how to finish off this sauce and plate this up. Trust me, it only takes about 10 minutes of prep, about 20 minutes to cook it all, and you'll have a Wednesday night dinner that your family will absolutely love, and you won't have to go out to the restaurant to get it. Let me tell you what, right now, a good glass of wine, I'll just eat those mushrooms. I'm going to lift this up and show it to you. Now, for those of you who go, how come you don't have an over kitchen camera yet? Patience, patience. We've built Rome in 6 months. So, but here is how these are starting to look. You can see they're starting to color. They've got a nice, beautiful brown to them, and they're starting to look kind of soft. Now, our garlic is in here as well. Okay, so while this, I said it again, queso. It's like one of my favorite foods, so I guess that's what I say. Okay, so I'm going to add a tiny touch more of butter. I'm going to get about a tablespoon. I'm going to let that finish in here. And while that is doing this, I'm going to take our thyme. Now, these are already washed, and I'm going to throw them in here. And I've got a little bit of lemon flavored thyme. It's not flavored, it's lemon thyme. It has a little bit more of a citrusy bouquet to it. And I'm going to put it in here. So, John, you can see I've just got these in here. Now, we'll not try to eat those, but we want to flavor this as best we can. Remember that if you don't have fresh, you can use dried. Just put them in a tiny bit of oil first. Let them kind of rehydrate so they're not so dry in there. Okay. We have a little bit of bubbles. All of our yummy bits are up off of here. And I wish you could, the minute that thyme hits there. Now remember, you could use basil, you can use sage. All those things are great, but today we're just using thyme. I'm going to take the Marsala. Remember, this is about a cup. I'm going to pour it right in here. Now this should be everything that you're cooking with. Remember, should be room temperature. You don't want anything cold going into something hot because you're going to shift your cooking back a little bit. I'm going to let this cook. I'm not adding any salt or pepper at this point of the game. I'm going to let this cook down. I'm going to crank the heat up just a little bit because I want that to reduce just slightly. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to, all those real pretty chefs, the beautiful ones that weigh like, 100 pounds, psst, they're not eating what they're cooking. Guarantee it. Around here, all my food class people, what is it? Never trust a skinny food photographer or a skinny cook. So we're going to reduce this down. And as that begins to reduce down, we're going to add the tiniest bit of chicken stock. Now you can use water if you want to, but remember, this is an opportunity to flavor. We want that flavor in our food. Water just waters it down. So we're going to add about a half a cup. Be generous when you're sauce making because everybody wants to eat the sauce. It's like yummy, yummy. So we're going to, now this stock that I have is not, has not been strained for fat after the original fat cap was removed. So when I make the chicken stock, we put it in the refrigerator, and then of course, the fat will get really, rise to the top, and it'll get where you can just take it off with a spoon. So I take that off with a spoon, and I don't throw it out because I may use it, but we just put it in the little ice cube trays. We've done that before. Okay, now this is bubbling away. We want it, right now we're on about medium high. We want to let this reduce down because we don't want this sauce to be thin and runny. We want it to be nice and thick. We're not going to add our cream until almost the end. And then at the very end, we're going to add some salt and pepper and a tad pat of butter to give it some shine. Our chicken is already done. This is reducing. We want to reduce that to about half. Please don't use thickeners. This is not a place for cornstarch or a roux or anything like that. We want to let this reduce down so that that Marsala taste goes all the way down in reduction, and it really stays. So it's not about thick, it's about the taste. So we're going to let this reduce down, and then I'll show you how to finish off that sauce. Our sauce has been reducing for what seems like forever, but it was really only about 3 to 5 minutes. You know when it's reduced when you can. Now, John, I'm going to show you this. Let's see if we can actually see it. Again, we'll get that overhead, just not here today. When you can, I can't show you. When you can move this and you can see the bottom of the pan and it stays through the scoop. Because you want it to be a little bit thick. You want to reduce down those flavors. So the question would be, well, why not just use less? Well, it isn't about the volume, it's about the flavor. Reducing flavors or liquids in sauces concentrates that flavor. And this is, after all, chicken marsala. So I can now move this around and I can see the bottom of the pan easily. So I know that it's reduced down. To that, very carefully, be careful, this is room temp, but it's still cooler than this. I'm just going to stir this cream around. Now this is a half a cup of cream. Now remember, you can not have it if you don't want to, and just have a rich Marsala sauce reduced down without that cream, but I don't know. I like it both ways, but today we're going with the cream. What if I don't have cream? Can I use milk? If you don't have cream, you can use some whole milk and maybe add just a tad bit of butter to fill in that fat. But you don't have to use the cream part at all. You can do this sauce without it. So we're going to let this finish reducing down. I'm going to give it a little taste for salt and pepper. So this is really our first salt and pepper type thing. So we're just going to do now, remember, don't double dip. This is one of my tasting spoons. So I'm going to add about a pinch, which is about a half a teaspoon of salt. And I'm going to add about the same, about half a teaspoon of pepper. Now, these things are up to you. I don't care for overly salty foods. I like pepper a little better than I do salt, but I do have one son who likes everything really salty. So I just let him salt his own. So we're going to let this reduce down, take about another 3 to 4 minutes. And while we're doing this, we're going to strain out our spaghetti and we're going to start to plate this dish. And when your family sees this coming, they are going to think that you are the greatest cook ever and that you should own a restaurant. Trust me, as someone who's owned a restaurant, you don't want to own a restaurant. So we're going to reduce this down and I'll be back in a minute and I'll show you how to plate this up. We've gotten our pasta out and put some on a plate. Now this is not an individual serving plate. This is why we're so fat, because this is not a plate that we're going to serve everybody. And we're going to take our chicken that is now cooled, and I've washed my hands, of course, and we're going to slice this. Get off of there. They're always troublemakers. And what I want to do is just slice it like this so that we can lay it on here. Now you see this chicken is still really juicy. It's nice and juicy, but yet it's cooked through. And we're going to add this to the top of our pasta. It's so hard to not eat this right now. Just to take that tiny bit. And we're just going to place him. Now remember, this is just one breast. Spread him out a little bit so that everyone can get a piece. I like to serve family style because it really helps. You can just come in and get a little bit. You might not get as much as, no person needs that whole breast of chicken. Okay, so the next step is we want to top it with our sauce. Now our sauce has reduced, as you see here. And we're going to just ladle this right over the top. Make sure there's plenty of mushrooms. Now you can see how this would easily feed 2 people, probably 3. A little bit around the edge. And now we're going to put a little bit of parsley on the top. Parsley's, now this is regular parsley. You should probably use Italian flat parsley, but I didn't have any. This was all that was growing. And now we have a delicious meal that looks good. It's really super delicious. And this can feed a family. Remember, small plates, but this could easily feed your family and have them thinking that you are the greatest thing since chicken marsala. We'll see you next time. If you'd like to be a guest on our show, please just leave a comment down below and we'll get in contact with you. We're here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area in the bustling metropolis of Saginaw, Texas. And if you would like to see a recipe cooked, send me a note. See you in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel. All of our subscribers help us keep this YouTube channel alive. And look for our new cookbook coming out this Christmas. Happy Marsala. See you next time.